grab some literature, and that really is about it. I've got no other... and actually someone's just made a very good film about the process, which I helped contribute to, and no one there of all the existing process ever remembers Manson. The only reason they're connected to him is because of this article he wrote for their magazine.
Okay, but we know that the Son of Sam cult was involved in murders in New York City. That wasn't innocent. And they were involved in animal sacrifices.
But was that linked to the process church?
Well, you have Manson, Manson, Berkowitz, his connection to Roy Radin. Roy Radin was murdered by Bill Menser, and the connection to, I believe there's many connections to the process.
Okay, as far as I was aware, I think most of them that Terry did were just made up or certainly embellished. Or, as I say, my brief was with Manson, so it was not something I could really go down that road. But as I will say categorically, as far as Manson's concerned, the only connection he had with them was ambient at best.
And you've never seen that INS report that connects Manson to the Process Church, and also connects to that Sirhan Sirhan, the assassin.
I think I must have read it in the Terry book, but because there were so many inaccuracies and falsehoods and fantasies, as far as I could see, I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I mean, it's easy. It's very, very easy to, if we're dealing with criminals, you can write anything you want about them. I really had to bear down on hard facts rather than suppositions. And as I say, I dismissed Terry's book because I just felt it was just it didn't ring true for me, in as much as Ed Sanders' book didn't. I have grave suspicions on if it's not referenced or the characters are unreliable. And my God, some of the characters associated with the Mansons are less than reliable.
Did you run across any information about Sirhan Sirhan attending parties at I forget the woman's name, Polanski's wife.
At the Sharon Tate?
Yeah, attending parties at Sharon Tate's home there, and sex parties and drug parties that also included the Process Church. Are you familiar with that document?
Well, again, there was absolutely no... and people get confused as well, because obviously the Process Church actually originated in London.
Right.
That was where it started. And there were Process members in London who were sort of fraternized, who were around... They were around everybody, but there was a sort of certain set around Polanski. But it was no more than that, from what I could see. And definitely the Seattle Drive house where the murders were, I had absolutely no information to lead that any of the Process Church were involved with that. The so-called sex parties, which Polanski and Tate and Peter Sellers and Yul Brynner and all these characters were supposedly involved with, again, I feel that's been embellished as well. There was obviously parties, there was obviously drugs, and there was obviously sex, but, to the sadomasochist parties of people being whipped and all sorts of stuff, I think it's just people's lively imaginations, to be honest with you.
And what about filming porn there? What did you come up with that?
With what, sorry?
That they were filming pornography.
Well, I spoke to one of the detectives there that, because there was long... considered to be pornographic films. This was Ed Sanders' territory, I think, had actually pointed this out originally. The only film they actually found was a home video of Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate making love, and it was apparently very basic, or probably for their own use. The one thing I will say, though, in the 40, 50 years since this story emerged, I would have expected some photographs or some film to have surfaced, In that period, I would have expected more than just suspicion to have surfaced. I'm not really convinced that there was anything really of the level that they were suggesting. Where they got their lines crossed, Sharon Tate was involved in a film called The Eye of the Devil in 1964, where she was involved in an occult. It was a sort of very much a B movie where she played an occult woman in a cult somewhere in France, I think it was. When the murders broke, the press got hold of these photos of her dressed up with sort of, regalia, and said she was involved with them. Well, it was all pinched from that movie, again, it's again the whole thing of myth-making. So I don't believe, I haven't, again, how can one comment on something when it's only been suggested? There's no proof, there's no evidence. The police did a thorough search and they found that one videotape. And from what I know is that the videotape was viewed and then it was placed back in the place they found it, in the loft of the Cielo Drive house. So I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Again, I would if I saw it or saw a real cogent reference to it.
Okay, then what was the motive for the murder, and why did they pick those victims?
That's a very good question, and it's one which, over the years has taxed minds, or people have drawn conclusions. The reason for the murders, a ambient member of the Manson family, a character called Bobby Beausoleil, had been involved in a drug deal that had gone wrong. And through a series of circumstances, that the character who was Beausoleil was acting as a sort of fence between this guy and a group of bikers, and the dealer manufacturer would not refund the money, and just things got wrong, and Beausoleil and a couple of other people attached to Manson who used to hang out at this guy's house. The guy was murdered. Manson knew about it, and he decided to clear off after that. And when he got back to Sparns Ranch, it was the news that the character Bobby Beausoleil had been arrested, and they found the blood. So Manson was apoplectic, was aware that obviously because he was loosely associated to this so-called Manson cult, it would probably fall back on him. Manson had been away at a place called Esalen, which is a New Age institute at Big Sur.
Sure. And
he'd been trying to preview his music there with little interest. So he was on a major downer. In his absence, the girls at the ranch had cooked up an idea that if they committed a copycat murder to the murder of this character, whose name is Gary Hinman, that it would, with Beausoleil in custody, it would defer attention from it. And from what I painstakingly researched to Manson's movements, he arrived back at the ranch in Big Sur at around 2-3 o'clock at the afternoon of August 8. He just green-lighted it. I believe he said, "Fine, we'll just find somewhere and we will kill them brutally, and we'll draw signs on the doors and the walls." What they'd done with the murder of Gary Hinman to defer initial attention was to write on the wall of Hinman's house a political piggy in blood, so hoping that the Black Panthers would be implicated with it. So with Beausoleil incarcerated, they thought if they do another murder similar and paint these sort of witchy signs or strange signs, that it obviously couldn't be Beausoleil and be freed. I mean, it's completely innocent nonsense, but that is the level of their intelligence. That's what we were working with, not the Messiah who's, calculating this murder spree. And so, why the victims? The only if it was Terry Melcher who'd rejected me on the music, well, Melcher had moved, and Manson knew he'd moved. I strongly believe that the reason that the murders were committed in Cielo Drive was, one, it was an isolated community, and two, the house was at the end of the drive. Manson is a sort of, as I say, a seasoned jailbird. You wouldn't commit a murder in a busy residential street. You would find somewhere which would allow you an easy exit. Manson knew of the house. Several of the girls had gone swimming there when Terry Melcher was there. And Tex Watson, the chief hatchet man that night, knew. So they knew the layout. It was at the end of the drive, so it would allow a swift exit. And in, again, a knee-jerk way, the house symbolized the community which had rejected Manson's music. Yeah. So it was symbolic. I don't think they actually cared or knew exactly who was there. There was no one there really who had really actually sort of rejected Manson in any way, or any of the people. You know, they were not pivotal in any way to his music career. So my own feeling is that they chose that house purely because it was isolated at the end of the drive and would allow, you know, not too much attention. So that's my feeling on that.
So basically at random?
Random-ish. I mean, it was random to me suggests anywhere. To me, it was the people were random, definitely. The victims were random, at random. There was nothing there that would have linked Manson with Sharon Tate, really. You may have come across her, but she hadn't sort of rejected him or anything, or any of the other guys. So ultimately, you know, I think it was more a case of the location. And also, you know, as I said, that it did symbolize, I think one of Manson's quotes when someone said, when they got back, you know, he said, oh, well, they're just a bunch of movie stars or something like that. So I don't think he really cared. I mean, obviously a lot of movie stars in Beverly Hills. But as I say, I think they knew the location. They knew it. I don't think there was anything there that would suggest that other than just it being a symbol of the world that had rejected Manson. And also, you know, Manson had also gone along with this sort of copycat idea. He probably thought it was probably a good idea. Again, if he'd been planning this, he kept it pretty quiet. He didn't know about Bobby Beausoleil's arrest until that afternoon. So, you know, that's quite a short time to sort of mastermind something like this. But you know, it's if it was a mob hit, you know, if it was a mob there was drugs and whatnot up there, I think they wouldn't have been as sloppy as this. You know, this was pretty, you know, painting signs all over the place and blood everywhere, and they wrote "pig" on the door of the house in Sharon Tate's blood. I should say Susan Atkins did.
Let me ask you a question. Back to Bobby Beausoleil for a second, because he wound up working on a film with Kenneth Anger. Do you know how that came about? Yeah, well,
I mean, Beausoleil's a hugely talented musician, composer, who prior to any association with Manson was a bit of a mover and shaker in both LA and San Francisco, and he sort of hooked up with Kenneth Anger prior to any Manson connection, and was living in his. Anger had this old house which was once a Russian consulate in San Francisco. I think Anger was fascinated with Beausoleil, and Beausoleil was a promiscuous talent for his young years, you know. So yes, he worked on Invocation of My Demon Brother, I think it was, or Lucifer Rising. No, it was Lucifer Rising, yeah. That film, yeah. Of which I think he finished off the soundtrack in jail eventually. Right. I mean, it's so crazy, but yeah, he was. I mean, I spoke to Bobby a few times in the preparation for the book, and you know, I think he was sorry he got mixed up with Manson. I think the only reason he really came into Manson's orbit was because of the music. You know, the pair of them were. Well, I think Beausoleil was reasonably established, and Manson was budding, was a budding, you know, go-getting musician. So, you know, and they did I found out they did a recording session together in some, I think it was Gold Star, somewhere quite eminent. So there was a link there, but I don't think Beausoleil was part of the Manson family. He just got hooked up with bad company, basically.
But you would describe Kenneth Anger as a Satanist, right?
Would I describe Kenneth Anger as a Satanist?
Yeah.
Left field, interested in Satan. I wouldn't say an actual card-carrying Satanist.
Okay.
But I'd say that he was definitely of the left field. I think he definitely was interested in that. You know, like a lot of those artists, you know, there's a real fascination, especially in the 60s, you know, where anything goes, you know. But I've no idea if he's a practicing Satanist.
Okay, and the film, I think he described himself as a practicing Satanist, but now also too,
he may well have done. Yeah, I haven't come across it.
The film Lucifer Rising actually there's a death of one of the actors in the film, and they kept it in the film.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I didn't know about the death of an actor. I mean, that's a crime scene.
It was. I think it was a motorcycle accident. Like a stunt. Right. Fascinating, and they kept it in the film. Now,
Well, it's been I watched it once for research purposes because I think Bosley's in it, isn't he, to start